Hi, hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today, as you can tell from like the title or like the thumbnail, I'm going to be talking about something that I've recently done. So towards the end of August, I decided to do a week-long reading of reverse harem romances. Safe to say it's like one of my favorite like subgenres within like the romance genre. If you had talked to me about like 6 months ago, I would have said that romance is probably one of my lowest read genres. I've read other books with like romance subgenres, but strictly speaking romance, that was not like my thing until now. So this was going to be a reading vlog. That didn't happen. Some of the footage got kind of lost, which sucks because I love reading vlogs. I love themed reading vlogs, but this is not one, sadly. So this is probably gonna feel more like a wrap up, but this is just the books that I read for this reverse harem week that I did. So 1 week I read 5 books, all within this subgenre. I could have read more, but I did start getting a little burnt out towards the end, and I picked up something like nonfiction. So reverse harem romance is basically our main character, and she has 3 or more love interests. There are some other rules that kind of fall into this subgenre, but that's probably the most agreed upon definition of this subgenre. I have certain tastes when it comes to subgenre I have discovered after this entire week. So the first book that I read that really inspired me to do this and to continue on with reading books within this genre, which by the way, if you hear clicking noises, my dog's like playing with one of his toys, so just ignore him. Anyways, but the book that I read that really started off this whole endeavor was Hate by Tate James. This is a enemies to lovers dark contemporary romance. So I believe it's categorized as new adult. Our characters are around the late like 19 to like early 20s, and we follow our main character Madison Kate. At the beginning of the book, Madison Kate and her best friend go to this like illegal MMA fight club thing, like underground on Halloween, and while she's there, this whole like turf war breaks out between 2 rival gangs. She kind of gets caught in the middle of it. A young woman dies, and for reasons that our main character is accused of starting some riots and for the death of this young woman. Most people know that that is not true, that she's kind of just someone to hold accountable. No one actually believes this like little 19-year-old girl was like responsible for anything deadly. She was arrested and tried, but she was found not guilty. Despite that fact, her father still like exiles her to go live with an aunt in like Cambodia or something. And when she comes back, her father is now dating this woman, and this woman is the mother of one of the men that had her implicated in these crimes. Because on the night of her arrest, these 3 guys that she met up with basically like planted evidence on her and like essentially delivered her to the police. So that's kind of how she kind of got arrested in the first place. These 3 men are now living at her home. They're all best friends. They're not related at all. But yeah, that's pretty much the summary of the story. Obviously, Madison hates all these guys because they implicated her in a crime that she did not commit. I think the reason why this book pushed me to do this week-long readathon of reverse harem romances is because of how fun this book was. Yes, it was like dark romance, so it's not like super uplifting. It was really entertaining to see our main character have witty banter with not just one person but like multiple people. It was really like fast-paced, and this author did really well at getting the reader, or at least me in this scenario, to continue on. If I wanted to just read one more chapter before bed, that was not gonna happen. I kept reading. I did give this book 4 stars. Did have some issues with it, mostly with the writing. It was cheesy, which is fine. That's kind of something that I expect a lot of times with romances, but the writing with the dialogue was kind of not my favorite. I had some little pet peeves, nothing that really like broke the story for me, but for example, our main character does this thing where she refers to her love interest by their first, middle, and last name, or some combination of like thereof, and it gets really irritating after a while because I don't think anyone actually talks like that. For example, when my mom gets frustrated with me, she'll call me by like my proper name, but our main character refers to these 3 guys by their full name, and it gets tiring after a while. Her name is Madison Kate Danvers, I think that's her name, so she gets called that a lot, and it's really weird because Madison does call them by their nicknames, at least in her internal like monologue, but when she speaks to them, she calls them Archer Death, which is, yeah, that's his actual name. Max Steel, also a real name, and then Kodiak Jones, I think is the other guy's name. but she doesn't actually refer to them. Can you stop making so much noise? But she doesn't actually like call them by a nickname in person, and if she does, it's not as often as their full names, which is weird. People don't really talk like that, in my opinion. There's also some moments that I thought were just really ridiculous and over the top. For example, there's this one scene where one of her love interests comes up to Madison and tells her, like, I don't like what you're wearing, it's too like provocative, take it off, or you shouldn't wear that, something along those lines. And she's like, fine, I won't wear this, and she like literally takes it off in public. And I feel like, not to like imply that the author did anything bad, but I feel like I've read something like that before. Like, I feel like that scenario has played out like on multiple television shows, maybe movies. I feel like I've read it before in like a fan fiction or something, but that kind of like, I feel like I've just read that before. It's a little like referential, I guess, maybe over the top, dramatic, little things like that. Again, didn't really like kill the story, and I didn't like end up hating it because of these little interactions, but just, it's just dramatic. Also, something else that kind of caught my eye, and it's really weird and random, but for some reason, some part of the story takes place on a university campus, but for some reason, students aren't allowed to have cell phones. I think that's weird, telling a 20-something-year-old not to have a cell phone, but go off, I guess. Anyways, I gave that 4 stars. Really enjoyed it. Inspired me to continue, obviously. The next book was hot garbage, and that is House of Vampires by Samantha Snow. I give this 2 stars. By the way, all these books that I'm going to talk about are available on Kindle Unlimited if you're interested. So this is also a first book in a series. In this book, we follow a young woman named, I think her name's Lorena. So she's recently been told that her grandmother has passed away, and she has come into some inheritance, and in order to claim her inheritance, she has to go to her grandmother's home, live there for like 6 months, collect the cash. And our main character thinks this is like easy, she can do this. She's never had a close relationship with her grandmother because her father is like estranged from his mother, so she never had that relationship. However, when she arrives in town, she's like literally like told, like, the way I'm telling you something right now, that she is part of some prophecy that her future child will bring magic back into the world. When I say she is told this, she literally walks into some like store or something, and a local witch tells her this. Really weird. And the father of her child is supposed to be one of the sons of Dracula, also told this. I usually don't use the phrase telling, not showing, because it gets thrown around a lot, but this is like quintessential that, in my opinion. But now you can see where like the reverse harem thing fits into the story. I would not consider this reverse harem at all. There are 4 sons of Dracula. One of them, his name's like Alan. I think he was like a peasant in pre-revolutionary France. We have another character who was a Cossack. We also have a character named Wei. I know he's Chinese, but from what era I like don't know. And then we also have another guy whose name who I don't remember because he came out in like the last 10 pages of the book. Safe to say about half of them are pretty obviously not gonna be a love interest for her, despite the fact that this is supposed to be a reverse harem and there's supposed to be like a harem, not a harem. And this also doesn't really focus on any of the relationships between her and any of the vampire dudes. It's very much focused on the plot, which would be fine, except there's so much plot in such a short book. I want to say this is like 150-ish pages, a lot of plot, a lot of stuff pushed into this, and it was not done well. At most, I think there was like an awkward date, and there might have been a kiss in this book, but for the most part, no actual romance in a reverse harem romance book. I was bamboozled. The only reason I gave this 2 stars was because there's one character that I really did enjoy, and I think her name was Jenny. She is a local black witch. She's also lesbian, and she has like this huge crush on this other witch, and her like the little scenes that she did get were really fun and entertaining, and she deserves a book series, not this boring woman. The only thing that this book did bring to me was the feeling that I needed to read better reverse harem books, because this was obviously not it. This was not giving, and I needed more. So thank you to this book for being so not good that I had to read better stuff. The next book was actually really fun and really different from what I've read before, and that is Gilded Mess by Colette Rhodes. So I give this 3.5 stars. This is a Goldilocks and the Three Bears retelling, which I've never read before, like ever. I think our main character's name is Oren. No, I don't remember what our main character's name is, but she was really, like, I really liked her as a main character. Very rarely do I get like super like attached, or I really end up liking a character. For the most part, I do like characters, but I don't like love characters or relate to them on like a different level. I felt like I could relate to our main character here. I want to say she's like in her late 20s, early 30s, and at this point in her life, she's not really like happy with what her life has been so far. She hasn't really accomplished much. I get the feeling that she's kind of like a jack of all trades, master of none type of thing. Like, she tries different things all the time, but she never actually like sticks to anything, and I think that's super relatable. So at the beginning of the book, her and her boyfriend move into this like really like shady cabin in the woods. She kind of really just jumped into this relationship, and pretty early on when they move in, she finds out that her boyfriend's cheating on her. So she essentially trashes their cabin, steals some of his stuff. I think she steals like a gun and some weed, and then I think she smokes it and then leaves. And while she's like out in the forest, which she shouldn't be in, you probably shouldn't be like walking around with a gun in the forest, whatever, she runs into a much nicer cabin in the woods, and she breaks into this nicer cabin, kind of uses their facilities, eats their food, falls asleep on their like furniture, that kind of thing. Again, Goldilocks inspired. What she doesn't know is that this cabin is owned by 3 brothers, and these 3 brothers are actually bear shifters. And there's the beginning of her story. I think a lot of people would enjoy this one. The writing is like fine and fun, but each of the 3 brothers fits like a specific, I guess, archetype that you see in romances a lot. One of the brothers is that really young, fun, very flirty type. We also have a kind of like soft, quiet thinker-ish type of a brother, and then the 3rd brother, he's like the only one who really doesn't like our main character, because she did like break into their house, and he's very like protective of what he owns, so he doesn't really like our main character at the beginning of the book. So a little bit of hate to love there, but it was really fun. I really did enjoy this one. So the issues that I had with this book: first of all, there's this like plot that was thrown in at the end. It didn't really have anything to do with our main character. She has her own drama that she starts with at the beginning of the story, but something else was introduced towards the end that she didn't really have a part in. So it felt like the author was just trying to create some sort of like conflict for her that didn't need to be there, because there's already another conflict brewing. And there was one scene that I think I should probably talk about, because it might turn off a lot of people. I guess you could say this counts as like a content warning. So there's one intimate scene where one of the brothers is getting intimate with our main character, and when I say they're brothers, they're actually brothers. And while they're getting intimate, another brother basically walks into the room, and while he does not interact with his own brother, he does interact with our main character at the same time. It made me uncomfortable, because I would count that as a threesome, but 2 of those sums are brothers, so that's kind of weird. You might not consider that incest, or you might. That's up for you to decide, but yeah, kind of weird. So the next book that I read was Queen Takes Nights by Jolie Sue Blackheart. I gave this 4 stars. This was the vampire book that I had needed. This is what House of Vampires could not give me. I don't remember the character's name. I'm terrible with names, but she is a young woman who's basically on the run. She's been on the run since she was like a teen, when her parents died. All she knows is that she's being chased by these kind of demonic like creatures that only she can see, I believe. And one night, while she thinks she's like at the end of her rope, that this is the day that she's probably gonna die, she's being hunted, she doesn't know where to turn to, 2 men come to her rescue, and they tell her that not only are they like basically vampires, that they are also vampires that worship a lineage of queens, and our main character happens to be from a specific lineage of like vampire queens. So that's where our story starts. If the plot sounds a little far-fetched, I think the author did a really good job at creating this very interesting, unique vampire world that I personally haven't read anything like before. If you're looking for something vampire-like but not just like Dracula-esque, I might recommend this one. There's a lot of creativity and uniqueness with the world that this author has created, and I really do want to continue this series. It was really good. So there's only 2 love interests that I could see in this one book. I know reverse harem is 3 or more. I do think that more would be introduced later on. I'm not 100% positive, but a plus that this book has that none of the other books that I read have, which I would say this is a true poly relationship. Not only do we get to see the bond between our main character and the 2 individual men, but these men also already have a pre-existing relationship that takes place prior to the beginning of the book that I really loved seeing. But yeah, basically everyone in this like throuple has a relationship, an emotional, a physical like bond with each other, and I really loved seeing that. I will say that some content warnings, I only really like to point out like the major ones, but of course you could check online for other content warnings. But the ones that really stand out to me the most, the ones that I probably want to warn myself of, are that there is like blood play with this in a sexual context, so if that makes you uncomfortable, it's here in this book. And the last book I want to talk about is Of Moons and Monsters by Hadley Willow. I gave this 4 stars. It was really fun. I've only seen like ads of this like on my Kindle. I've never seen anyone talk about it, but the cover is like really pretty. So the beginning of this book kind of starts off with like an urban fantasy setting, and then we move to something a little more high fantasy. In this book we follow a young woman named Isla, and Isla works for a vampire, and her best friend is a half demon. She's human, but she's pretty much spent most of her life around like supernatural creatures. One day her best friend comes to her and tells her that he wants to make his ex-boyfriend jealous at this like big fae party, and so Isla and her best friend go, and while she's there at the party, she essentially gets like kidnapped by some like traffickers, and she gets taken to this different reality, this different realm, not on Earth at all, and is given to these guardians who are essentially supposed to protect a specific like country, I guess you could say, a kingdom, from like other outside forces. Our guardians didn't know about this. They weren't on this entire purchase. This is something that they didn't want. They would want someone to willingly come to them. They are given Isla, and they're trying to make the best of the situation. I would say all of the guardians really want her to go back to where she came from because it's like the right thing to do. They don't want to like hold her against her will or anything like that. But Isla does start getting a little attached to these guardians, or most of them. One of them has like, again, there's like a hate to love thing going on with one of them, but for the most part 3 out of the 4 are actually really welcoming and kind to her, and she thinks that like, hey, I'm probably not going to be able to go back home, so make the best of the situation. These men are also like shifters, but they're this weird like fantasy combination of like a basilisk, griffin, dragon type being. There was some sort of like political drama kind of brewing, which shockingly enough to me, as someone who likes political drama, I did not really care for this part of the plot. I really just was focused on the romance. The author did really well at interacting with each of these different brothers in arms. They're not actually related, but they have a kind of that type of bond, creating their relationship with the main character. I think the reason why this one stood out to me the most is that this one was fairly uplifting, while the others were either like dark romances or had darker themes. This one, again, it does start off with like human trafficking, but for the most part it was a very like uplifting, very sweet, kind, wholesome romance. It also kind of takes place in kind of wintry realm type thing, so if you're looking for something colder for the coming seasons to read, it does have a kind of chill to it sometimes. The beginning was a little rushed to kind of get through the whole kidnapping plot, but for the most part, once she gets taken to these guardians, it does hit its stride, and the author does really good at pacing itself out after that part of the story. This is probably my favorite that I read. Unfortunately, this is the only one that hasn't been continued yet. I think this only came out earlier this year, so the next installment hasn't come out, and I have to wait for it, sadly. I know this wasn't the most entertaining of videos. I do wish this was a reading vlog. It would have been, I think, a bit more fun. I guess you can take this as like a recommendation video or not for reverse harem romances. Let me know if you've ever read within this genre, if you have any favorites that you'd like to recommend to me as someone who's like just really starting off in this subgenre. I'd like to hear anything you have to say in the comments down below. Feel free to like, comment, or subscribe, or do neither. It's all cool with me. I will link all my social medias down below, as well as some far more important links. And thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out.